and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Sami Sorang with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program.
Thanks.
Hi.
Now, South Korea, China and Japan held a trilateral summit this past week. Now, the relationship between the three countries is, to say the least, complicated. So, in a nutshell, how would you describe the trilateral diplomatic relationship?
Well, in a nutshell, I would say that it's like a forest neighborhood, let's say so. As all the three countries have got their own interests, their own problems, but they're still forced to be together and have to deal with each other. So.
And Werner?
So, well, I say the trilateral relationship is close but distant. Yeah, of course, they are geographically close countries, but there's more complicated problem about maybe in history or cultural things, and we have very different way of thinking in the three countries. So close but distant.
Close but distant. Okay, and Fabian?
Well, sometimes I get the feeling that it's like they're like siblings, but estranged siblings who from time to time fight a lot, but actually have more in common than they would sometimes like to admit.
That's a very poetic analogy. I like it. Yeah. Okay, so this week on Foreign Correspondents, the topic is Northeast Asia Trilateral Summit, as well as how Japan and China are reacting to continued developments on the Korean Peninsula. President Moon Jae-in visited Japan for a one-day trip. It was President Moon's first visit to Japan since his inauguration, and he held a 17-minute meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese Premier Keqiang. The three leaders expressed their unanimous support for the Panmunjom Declaration, which was announced on April 27th, and also adopted a joint statement pledging trilateral cooperation toward peace and stability in Northeast Asia. The joint statement welcomed the goal of complete denuclearization from the Inter-Korean Summit Agreement while expressing hopes for a successful meeting between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
항구적 평화 정착을 위한 과정에서 삼국 간 긴밀한 소통과 협력이 지속적으로 이루어지길 기대하고 약속합니다.
北朝鮮の諸問題に関する累次の安保理決議を完全に履行する。
希望各方都能够抓住当前的时机，推动恢复对话，为政治解决半岛问题，为实现。
On the sidelines of the trilateral summit, President Moon also held separate one-on-one discussions with the leaders of Japan and China. President Moon, following his first meeting with Prime Minister Abe in 2 months, emphasized the need for dialogue and the normalization of ties between Japan and North Korea in order to ensure peace on the Korean Peninsula as well as the wider region. And in regards to China, President Moon credited Beijing for the successful Inter-Korean Summit and expressed hopes of further improving ties between South Korea and China during his meeting with Premier Keqiang. The trilateral summit and the adoption of a joint statement that followed have reaffirmed the partnership and mutual commitment shared among the three countries. Okay, Fabian, what's your overall assessment of the trilateral summit?
Well, I think it's noteworthy that they've met. That's a news story itself. The declaration was rather symbolic. I mean, I read it in detail, and mostly it was about economic cooperation. That was actually the main thing, and how to fight protectionism. But the North Korea issue, the denuclearization, is maybe the most pressing issue, the one that gets the most attention. And that was only like a small paragraph. So, yeah, I mean, it was more symbolic, I would say.
Do you think the North Korean issue should have been expanded out in more detail? It should have been fleshed out?
We will talk about that probably more in detail later, but I think the three countries don't have necessarily the same interest in that conflict, so it's hard to do that in detail, but I think they want to show unity and demonstrate that they are on the same page, even though maybe in detail they are not on the same page.
Right, okay. Ueno, what was your assessment?
Yeah, like he said before, from my point of view, it was symbolical thing too. It may be expected to be like that, but there should be more strong statement about the denuclearization of the North Korea. We have to tie each other in three countries, Korea, Japan, China. There should be some more substance denuclearization about the North Korea.
So do you think it should have been longer, it should have been fleshed out, or do you think there should have been a more hardline stance?
I think it's take a time, but it is important to show that we three countries, Japan, Korea, and China, is really wanting the North Korea to be denuclearized. So it should have been showed strong attitude to the North Korea some more.
Okay. And Stan, what's your overall assessment? And also, what were some underwhelming aspects? What could have been done better?
Well, obviously there were no breakthroughs, especially regarding the North Korean issue. View this summit as like an attempt to show the united front that the three countries stand together for North Korean nuclear issue. But on the other hand, speaking of the drawbacks, the three countries also showed that they do not have kind of a single approach, united approach towards North Korea. That is why they have to make this small statement regarding the Pyongyang's nuclear program with the broad brushes.
Right.
There was nothing concrete, and only thus they could make a joint statement.
Okay. Now, what do you read? What do you take from Xi Jinping's absence?
Obviously, he had something more important to do. I mean, it sounds cynical, but I mean, he was meeting Kim Jong-un in Dalian. I mean, Li's position in China is not the best right now, so I think he's definitely like the number two. I mean, that the number one, the most important person, did not go to the summit shows actually a little bit lack of diplomatic courtesy.
So a lack of diplomatic courtesy. Do you agree, Ueno?
I think that the President Xi Jinping is not a very big problem for this time, because this is started in 1999 from the ASEAN Plus 3 summit.
Right.
From that start, there was not the president, but prime minister is coming from China. It has been like that. Nothing special is worried about the absence of Xi Jinping. But like he said, Xi Jinping met Kim Jong-un. This was a kind of giving some message to our three countries, or seeing the two summits in North Korea and China. It may be.
Right. So this wasn't the first time that President Xi Jinping, that the number one wasn't there, but number two perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, Stan.
Yeah, there was obviously nothing rude in President Xi's behavior. I remember the previous time the trilateral summit was held here in Seoul 2 years ago. Also Li Keqiang was present instead of President Xi Jinping. And nothing terrible happened, and they talked, and they had quite a good results. I mean, between South Korea and Japan especially, they agreed on many things.
Right, okay. Now let's delve further into the details. The three nations, they gave their unanimous support for the April 27th Panmunjom Declaration in the form of a joint statement. What's your take on that?
As I said before, they want to show unity in the North Korea issue. I think that's the most important message that they want to give. I mean, Japan is, for example, worried that they are left out in that process. And the pressing issues for Japan, for example, the abduction issue, is not an issue that South Korea or China share. So I think they have a little bit a different interest in the North Korea issue. China and South Korea are closer linked than, for example, Japan.
Right, okay. Do you agree that Japan, the government, feels left out from the developments on the Korean Peninsula?
Yeah, it could be. Actually, our government is worried since the beginning of this year, when North Korea started to get into the conversation to the South or maybe United States.
Then do you think anything can be done by the two Koreas to help alleviate Japan's worries?
Well, actually, President Moon Jae-in suggested about our abductees issues to the Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong said that they are ready to conversate with the Japanese government. So it was kind of not very bad point.
Okay. Now, as we've mentioned before, Kim Jong-un, he visited China just the day before the trilateral summit. What was his intention, do you think?
Well, I think he was, the aim was about the same as the previous time. You know, he wanted to secure China's support before the meeting with President Trump. Obviously, North Korea and China, their relations are like big brother and a small brother. After all these issues that two countries had previously, like China obviously didn't like the North Korea's behavior, and the level of their relations have dropped during the North Koreans' nuclear tests and missile launches. But now they managed to restore it, I guess. Kim Jong-un finally realized that he cannot really carry out the things he wants without China's support. And that is why I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to China again just before the meeting with Donald Trump. I think China's support is very important for the North.
Okay. And do you think the trilateral summit will have any bearing on the outcome of the Trump-Kim summit?
That's a good question. To be honest, I think Trump is a very egocentric character. I think he will do his own thing, and probably his advisors pay more attention to the trilateral summit than he actually does.
Right, okay. Do you agree, Wano?
Well, I think its joint statement is not going to give lots of influence to the summit of the North and the U.S. because, like I said before, it was kind of more symbolical statement. So maybe United States and North Korea also know what is coming out from the trilateral summits. So going to be not good, not very much influence on that.
Not very
Yeah,
influential.
I think Goena is absolutely right. There is not really a big significance in the words and in the statements made during the trilateral summit. It's more like for the three countries' population and for the three countries' diplomats and politicians, rather than for Kim and Trump.
Okay, all right, that was the trilateral summit. So let's now move on to the second part of the program and take a look at how China and Japan have been reacting to the recent developments on the Korean Peninsula. The 2018 Inter-Korean Summit sent shockwaves around the world. The historic summit was also welcomed by South Korea's closest neighbors, namely China and Japan. But according to many experts, both Beijing and Tokyo may be feeling a sense of unease regarding the latest developments on the Korean Peninsula. Following agreements in early March to arrange an Inter-Korean summit, as well as a meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, some observers pointed out that China was being alienated from the entire process. As if to tamp down such worries, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Pyongyang on May 2nd. And in their reporting of Wang Yi's visit, China's media emphasized that Beijing would not be left out of the loop regarding Korean Peninsula affairs. In the midst of all this, on May 8th, just one day before the trilateral summit between Seoul, Beijing and Tokyo, Kim Jong-un traveled to China once again, 40 days after his last visit. According to some media outlets, Kim's latest visit to China may be intended to send a message to the US ahead of his summit with President Trump that his country's alliance with China remains strong. Meanwhile, Japan, which has long advocated a hardline policy on North Korea, has softened its stance in the aftermath of the Inter-Korean Summit and in light of the upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. It's a radical departure from their stubborn posture at the start of the year, with Tokyo also considering a possible North Korea-Japan summit, as well as the normalization of diplomatic ties between the two countries. However, Japan has stressed that certain preconditions must be met before a Pyongyang-Tokyo summit can take place, namely the release of Japanese nationals who have been abducted by North Korea. Tokyo also declared that issues regarding North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile must be addressed as well. In this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of journalists to analyze and discuss China and Japan's political calculations in light of recent developments in inter-Korean relations. Okay, so let me begin with this question. Following the April 27th Inter-Korean Summit, President Moon was able to secure phone calls with the leaders of US, Russia and Japan almost immediately to let them know of what was going on. But in the case of China, it took him over a week. Why the delay?
I mean, about the concrete reasons, it's speculation, and I don't feel comfortable to come up with some theories, but definitely it shows lack of diplomatic courtesy. I think if Moon Jae-in had to wait for 1 week, it also gives a symbol, like a meaning, right? That's also a message, and it's not a good one, I think.
Do you agree, Stan?
Yeah, it resembles me of the ancient times when the Chinese emperor would meet the ambassadors from foreign countries, and that China was considered to be the center of civilization, and the rest were kind of the barbarians from other sides of the world. I cannot but just remind about this. But generally, yeah, I think that there was obviously a message from China's side to Mr. Moon Jae-in, and I think it partially may be because of the third issue, because it's still going on. And although China showed already the signs of easing the tensions with the South because of that issue, but it also shows that this problem is not solved yet.
So not all the way solved.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears over to Japan. North Korea has dialed up its criticism against Japan, calling it a free rider in the recent efforts towards peace. What do you think Pyongyang's motive is in doing this?
I think what North Korea dislikes about the current political situation is that Japan is very hardline in terms of denuclearization. I think Japan doesn't want to give them any economic incentives during the process of denuclearization, but they want to completely give up their nukes and then lift sanctions. And I think North Korea sees this as an affront. Yeah.
Okay, what's your take?
Yeah, one of the diplomat I know said that generally speaking, North Korea is criticize one country when they wanted to have a conversation or negotiation. So I think it was a sign that North Korea want to have a conversation or negotiation in between Japan.
Okay, and that was a Japanese diplomat?
Yeah, it was Japanese diplomat.
Okay. Now, we mentioned this before, the abductee issue. How important is it for the lay Japanese citizen, that abductee issue?
Actually, Japanese citizen is very, very important from the heart. Like it's a long time ago, just 13, 14 kids abducted by the North Korea, and the parents is very, very style from since then for 40 years. Solvement of the abductee issue is important issue for Japanese citizens.
So for the citizens as well, it's an important emotional closure.
Yeah, emotional
as well.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
I think it is also very important for Prime Minister Abe right now, because his popularity rating is falling down drastically, and he tries to do the best to solve, or at least partially solve, this abductees issue. In this case, he will be popular and he would win the party re-elections again in September.
Okay, all right. Now let me move to Germany. When Germany was separated into the East and the West, did the neighboring countries, how invested were they in having the two countries reunified again?
Well, it came as a big surprise, and it was also, of course, there were many negotiations going on between the Soviet Union and the US. At that time, I think Gorbachev, he also pushed a lot to allow the unification to happen. Of course, there were some worries, for example, that at that time, the Second World War was, only passed not even 40 years. And so there were worries that a unified Germany could also possibly in the future be also a military threat or could become too strong. And there were historic concerns about that too. So it was not really clear, but in the end, it worked out well. But to draw the comparison to Korea, I think it's also not clear to what degree the geopolitical countries have an interest rather in a unified Korea or in a divided Korea.
So going on from that stand, I'm sure most of the regional powers, they have something to gain from peace in the region. But do you think there might be some countries that secretly would prefer a divided Korea over a reunified one?
Well, in my opinion, most of the countries would actually rather prefer a status quo. that exists at present time, rather than seeing a unified Korea. As it will create, the unified Korea will create a lot of problems in the region for all players. For Japan, it would make a big, solid competitor, like Korea that is 80 million people strong, and it will start to develop the economy actively. So I do not think that's going to be good for Japan. There's going to be a competition. And for China, if we suppose that the Korea would be unified under the South and American agenda, then the sphere of American influence would widen to Chinese and Russian borders, which I think that China and Russia would prefer not to have. Of course, there could be some benefits from that. First of all, the economic benefits for all sides. China could invest in infrastructural projects in the unified Korea. Russia might also benefit by connecting the railways, by building a gas pipeline.
Well, you mentioned Russia, China, and Japan. Then what do you suppose the U.S. would prefer?
For U.S., I think the unified Korea might be a better choice because in this case, the United States would extend its influence in the entire Korean Peninsula and would be able to project its power more strongly to China and to Russia. Well, just imagine what would happen if they built a new THAAD complexes near the Chinese border and Russian border. They would basically be able to see the entire country.
I would doubt that a little bit because after a unified Korea and the military tensions, if they decreased, then how can the U.S. justify its military presence here? And I think after all, in the long run, I think the conflict, the real conflict will be between the U.S. and China. And for that, they need the military presence here. And I think the North Korea conflict is actually one way of keeping that presence.
Yeah, it is a way to keep the presence. But they have already mentioned that in case North Korea denuclearizes, the United States will still keep their armed forces here in South Korea. Well, I guess in this case, we just have to wait and see.
Actually, there's one more aspect. I think both, let's say Germany or also the US, many countries in the West, they earn a lot because they sell weapons to South Korea, for example.
Okay, now let's come back to the three countries. Aside from the North Korean issue, what other pertinent issues must the three countries work on together?
Well, I think the historic issues are the most important. I mean, for me as an outsider from Europe, it's hard to make a judgment about it, but I find it really sad that a lot of potential between those countries is wasted because they cannot overcome the past. And from my opinion, I think probably Japan has to do the first step, and also I think Korea should not finger point too much. I mean, it's hard to find a compromise there, but I would really love to see the three countries grow together, and also maybe in the future there could be something similar like a European Union also in East Asia, and that, I mean, it would be a win-win-win situation.
Okay, a winner?
Yeah, I said we have been make very much support for since before to get compromised in the historical things, but it didn't work so far. We keep trying, but well, from this time it's not working. So maybe aside from the historical issues, we should maybe have a good relation in the maybe our economical things, or get together and make a good relationship between three countries, which maybe lead to some more peaceful Northeast Asian circumstance. It's gonna be cooperation, I guess.
All right, we'll have to end there. Do you have any final comments?
We know that the upcoming summit will be in Singapore, so my comment is that I hope I will have a visit to Singapore soon.
If we talk about the trilateral summit, I think that summing it up, it was more like a symbolic meeting, but it was not excessive. It was just good as is. It would not harm, at least, the upcoming North Korea-United States summit. And maybe it will even help to resolve that.
All right. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
It was
very
nice
much.
being here.
As Uenu mentioned earlier, the relationship between Korea, China, and Japan have often been described as close but distant. Close in terms of physical proximity and culture, but distant in terms of politics and diplomacy. But with the recent developments in inter-Korean relations, it's our hope that the three countries can unite and pave the way for a better future. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.